So we're here to talk about I would say, the systemic prompt for Coherence 2025, like the reasons to do it, the broader context, and um, and the place it might have in the emergence of whatever is next, the merging of technology and regenerative spirit. Uh, yeah, this is how I would put it. How would you put it?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. And as we talk with more and more people about coherence, because it's a new format, I think the thing that sticks with me that we need to learn how to explain is this idea of a collaborative conversation.
Mhm.
Because actually, okay, we're collaborating together, yet still the purpose of this conversation for us is to deepen our collaboration, to understand each other's idea spaces better, to understand the bigger picture of coherence. So this is not just two gentlemen philosophizing on a Sunday morning. We're two collaborators trying to go deeper into this idea to understand why the hell are we here, why are we doing this, and what does it mean in
Mhm.
the so this idea of this collaborative conversation, I think, is key, and I still don't know how to explain it very well. But I think once we get to explaining that well, we will understand coherence much better ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, we agreed beforehand on three topics to tackle. They're all kind of flowing into each other, and I felt it's a good idea to first start with, yeah, the context right now, uh, as it relates to a possible future, a fork in the road between, let's say, a turquoise society, according to, by the way, which model? So I'm thinking of spiral dynamics, but I think the turquoise classification specifically then relates to Wilbur, as far as I know, but I'm not fully sure. Maybe you are.
Yes, I'm I only know them both surface level, so in my
Yeah.
brain they're kind of one thing. I
Yeah.
know that there is differences in nuances. I even asked ChatGPT to explain it to me once, but to me it's D1 model, and I know that spiral dynamics was first and da da
Yeah.
da. But though actually, I think the color turquoise is the same in both models, if I remember
Maybe.
correctly.
Yeah.
Teal is yellow, and then turquoise, I think, is where they meet again in colors.
Yes. Yeah. So it's first it's the fork in the road, the gap between two possibilities for like our future on this planet as a society, um, between a turquoise vision, which, as far as I understand, is characterized both by individual agency as well as like a highly collaborative potential capacity, between all the individuals that are sovereign.
So
And we'll get to that later, the role of the individual. And but the distinction is made between, yes.
So the way I think it, sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's important.
Hmm.
So the way I think about it is, for me, that's where, because turquoise is supposed to be super systemic vision,
Hmm.
right? And for me, this is where it merges with the regenerative ideas, because if you start thinking super systemically, you realize that we're deeply embedded in Earth, in the biosphere, and it's all bloody connected.
Yes.
And if you're deeply systemic, you cannot be anything other than hyper ecological and seeing the that. So yeah,
Yes.
that's for me. That's in the turquoise. The super ecological regenerative vision merges with the humanistic vision. Let's say
Yes.
so. You cannot be a turquoise human without also being highly regenerative and understanding we need to work for the good of all life.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess, from what I've sensed, I think this really makes up a lot of the, I would say, actually, to a degree, irritation and pain in the people who are already becoming aware of this, that there's so little awareness around such a quite obvious fact. if you really think about it for a second, it becomes quite obvious that this is a whole and that we can't erode our foundation, and yet we do, and yet it's kind of still a standard. They can be puzzling. Uh, and the distinction of this regenerative, let's say, turquoise vision is made to, let's say, a surveillance technocracy that is powerful, that is expansive, and yet it's quite blind. And it might actually be on a self-termination path, as Daniel Schmachtenberger has often put it, without knowing it. So grabbing, 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 and not even noticing that you're eroding yourself, not just others. So these are the two, like, let's say, the two attractors. And we'll probably see a mix of those. But that's the first kind of gap, the fork in the road that we want to tackle. And what's your take? We've talked about a window of opportunity to choose one over the other path. What do you think is the window of opportunity and how to enact the one over the other?
So I think right, I think the wonderful thing about our times is that everybody thinks things must change.
Yeah.
This is like left, right, up, down. Pretty much almost nobody is happy with the world as it is. And not just like general personal, but like fundamentally, I think most people think things should change. Of course, they have very, very different answers, but it's interesting and it's a big opening. You mentioned Daniel Schmachterberger, all of the other collapsologists were pushing at boundaries in dozens of ways, and not just ecological, but also economic. And yeah, I mean, we're pushing all of these systems to the breaking point. So something will go sooner or later, right? It's inevitable. Also, I mean, aside from systems and this and that, right? If you look at the big arcs of history, no system lasts forever. You know, Roman Empire did good, but it didn't last forever. And so on and so forth. So of course things will change sooner or later. The question is how violently and to what comes next, right? It's interesting to see, for example, if we think about systems change, the transition from aristocracy and feudal orders
Mhm.
to democratic societies, etc. Right? And it went very, very differently in different countries. From extreme violence in France, in Russia, to, well, it's just kind of seems to have faded away in Holland and in the UK.
Mhm.
Still there for decoration, but
Yes.
we didn't need to make the rivers run with blood for it. So systems can change in profoundly different ways, right? Either through slow fading away or through violent collapse, and so on and so forth. So uh, why now? Why the window? Because I mean, I am not an expert on collapsology. The way I look at it is I want a different and better society, and I'm going to do everything that I can to work towards that. I would hope that we can do it peacefully and without hundreds of millions or billions of people dying violently. But I don't know. I'm agnostic on collapse within our lifetime
Mhm.
or in general. Because, and the reason that like what we're doing with coherence and all of this, whether society collapses violently in a few decades, the global society, I fundamentally don't believe we can wipe the human species off the planet because we're pretty resilient. You know, it's us and cockroaches, last two species standing. So I think that's unlikely, but wiping out the capability of an advanced civilization, meaning spending billions to feed on AI, making the new smartphone every year, and so on and so forth, that's entirely possible. right? Those chains are quite fragile, and they require global scale of
Yeah.
cooperation. So I can entirely see that failing. But no matter whether this happens or not, I think we need to figure out better ways to organize, collaborate in a way that is that allows us to live in as good neighbors in peace, as good stewards of Earth. And
Yes.
collapse or no collapse, everything that I'm doing is working towards that. I give a simple example. I worked for 10 years to try, it didn't work out because I want to build a village to live in a neighbor, so that we can have this conversation as neighbors in the village square, right? And if the collapse comes, actually having good relationships and good, a good local network is the only thing that will save you.
Yeah.
If the collapse doesn't come, having good relationships and a good neighborhood is the really important for having a good life. So it doesn't matter one way or another,
Yes.
it's a worthwhile cause. And I think most of these things, right? There's this cartoon which I saw once. I don't know whether you saw it. It's like this climate conference, and this guy is doing all of these graphs and da da da. And then somebody puts up their hand and says, "What if it's all not true and we build a better society all for nothing?"
Yes. Yeah, I saw a similar like comic for climate change. Like, what if we get cleaner water and cleaner air for nothing because the climate wasn't changing? And I get, I actually get where part of the criticism is coming from. Like, I think many good efforts, like the call, we all have to respond with the undertone of solidarity and empathy and democracy and all of this. I think all of this is mapped to quite a degree that you can use these talking points, you can use these labels to evoke consensus for something that might have something very different at its core. And I think what you've just been talking about, the village square, the local community, kind of already is an answer to this, where the concern around Trojan horses and false tongues kind of falls away. Um, when it comes to a global civilization, though, I still think this is important. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I just wanted to mention it that the one threat that I see is that human psychology is mapped. Uh, Temperaments across the population are clustered, probably by today quite easily. Just taking a side, for example, between Republicans and Democrats or other political kind of polarities in the world, and then you can just essentially feed the right language to people and have them agree to things they would never agree to if they were sober or if they were seeing clearly or be informed correctly. So I think the turquoise vision of society as well might actually as it grows to be a serious contender, like a decentralized network of autonomous players, if it grows to be a threat to the powers that be, I wonder to which degree we'll see some impulses, some attacks even. And what I would hope then happens is that we kind of can make out whoever just adopts the message and veils themselves in the cloak of a certain language and who means it. And I wonder whether we can develop like our sensory system to the point of kind of noticing a ring of truth in communication, of noticing who's really in it and who has just done a market analysis, which keywords are firing right now.
We should, by the way, get to the window part because we
Yes.
missed that. So look, there is this like what first they laugh at you. No,
Hmm.
first ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win, or something like this. You've
Hmm.
seen.
Yes.
I think of systems as a kind of a living thing, not at the sense of, capitalism is a sentient thing intentionally driving, but think of it at the level of an amoeba, right? An amoeba is clearly alive. It protects its boundary. It fights off things that are trying to hit it.
Hmm.
And I really think things like capitalism or, ideas, have you come across the idea of, I mean, everybody's heard of memes, but the actual Daniel Dennett book, it comes from Daniel Dennett, who he wrote some famous books in the 90s around genes. And then he extended the idea to memes as being these living things. So in that sense, large systems, the big ideas that drive us, nation state, state money, state education, it's all connected, right? State control over violence.
Hmm.
And it's really important to recognize that I'm reading some more Graeber books now, that our actual system, even though we're like, oh, nice in Europe and everything is good, but it's all based on violence, on state monopoly of violence. In the end, if you fuck up, the government comes with people who will overpower you and stick you into confinement, right? Whether it's not paying your taxes or whatever, the end result is the government takes away your freedom because they have a monopoly on power. So that's the whole nation state complex is an idea that's out there that's established itself really well. And clearly it's robust, right? It's managed to stretch from Estonia to China, from one something million people to one something billion people. So it's a powerful idea. And as an idea, it protects itself. At the same time, what gives me hope in the long, long run is that things always change. Nothing lasts forever.
Yes.
People used to say that divine rights of the kings and feudalism is just the way the world is.
Hmm.
Spent hundreds of years telling people that God created people of different kinds and one kind had the right to rule and own the other kind. And it was actually just as much in Europe as between Europe and other countries. For hundreds of years, most European peasants were a form of slavery. And yet somehow we've managed to get out of that,
Yes.
right? So we can change this too. When, how, and what, I don't know. But winding back to coherence and what we're doing, what I do know is that creating capability, viability, building up this story of there is another bottom up, turquoise, regenerative way of collaborating, of building and being, and it's viable. This is what we need.
Yes.
Right now, we don't have, what's our entrepreneurship, and it's just because he's the world's biggest drama queen, our entrepreneurship guiding light in the world. It's fucking Elon Musk,
Is he
right?
still?
I
I think he was for a while.
think
He might
spotlight
not be anymore.
now because he is, he's just like we're all watching him burn because but still, it's he is the peak of the worst, but it's still kind of pointing like, oh, this is the pyramid I need to become part of to become a successful entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So we need to build the capacity, whether this means that we create hope and it'll take 100 years for this to become mainstream, or whether it'll become in 20 years, I don't know. But going back in a circuitous route to the window of opportunity. So I've been a technologist all my life, really, because my father was in computer science. I grew up drawing on punched cards. Do you know, do people your age know what a punched card is?
No, I don't think so.
I just felt it an old man. I won't go into computer history. In the old days, you had to feed information to computers on paper. You either had tape paper tape with holes, or cards about this size that had holes punched in them, and that's how you fed information.
I
Anyways,
really didn't know. What? Wow. And what was the insertion like?
it's just holes in the paper, physical holes in the paper.
And then that's like a binary code, and
Yeah.
that's all right. I didn't know. That was 80s or
No, 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 no. That was 60s. So I know it
yeah.
from 70s, but there was still in my high school in Canada, we never used it, but there was still standing an old punched card machine for connecting to the mainframe of the school thing. So that was in mid 80s. It was still standing there.
Wow. All right.
I never,
Didn't know.
I never used it. But anyways, I grew up with, because my father brought those from work, because once you use them, it was just garbage. So he brought them. It was good paper for
Mhm.
my drawing materials. Uh, and anyways, I mean, technology comes in waves. And I think the key thing that is part of coherence is that the nature of the digital technology, clearly it's been society changing, personal computer, internet, smartphone. And I think social media. And I think what we are seeing, and the key thesis of coherence is, as the technology becomes more and more, let's say, advanced in modifying and shaping our behavior, right? Because if we look at email, email is clearly society transforming, but it's pretty value free. I mean, it
Mhm.
changed who could talk to who and such, but in a value-free way, right? It didn't push you towards fascism or capitalism, or like you could send a hate mail, you could send a love mail, right? You could do any kind of a revolution with email. But when we get to social media, now it's well documented. It's powerfully affected our attention. It's powerfully affecting democracy. It's powerfully affecting probably a whole bunch of other things which haven't figured out, like the suicide rate of young women, right? People are, yo, you haven't seen this?
I've heard a lot about the suicide rate of young men. Um,
Look at the suicide
Often.
rate of young women, and it
Uh-huh.
completely tracks Instagram.
Uh-huh. Oh, that makes sense. I would generally expect young people, but yeah, from the use habits
So it
around me that I've seen, of
and
course.
it hits men and women at different ages and stuff. I'm not an expert, so I don't want to go into it. But in any case, it's affected things such as suicide rate of people. So that's really profound, which means the
Yes.
technology has really profound impact on democracy and our mental health. And I
Hmm.
think the next wave, meaning AI, will have an even bigger and much more profound, because it's so much more intimate and can connect with us so
Yeah.
much more closely. There's already been things going around, and this is just the start, right? With Chat GPT, whatever you tell it, telling you, oh, you're so great, this is a great idea, right? Like, it's very hard to get Chat GPT to tell you something is a stupid idea, because it's
Yes.
there to tell you how great you are. And that will spiral, right? So I believe there's a huge power in the ability to shape society with the coming AI wave. Web3 still has that potential, they just never realized it, right? So I do believe that everything they preached at the start, well, 30 years is how long I've been hearing about it. But Bitcoin, what is it? I don't know, 20 years something. It just hasn't really been realized, right? People haven't figured out how to get Web3 blockchain into general society, but the potential is definite. It's not, I don't believe it's because the
Hmm.
potential is not there, just people haven't figured out, and because the big potential goes directly against the nation state and the big installed systems. So
Unless for
you
the part they can use for themselves. I'm actually still I'm still observing. Uh, like I know that CBDCs are in development. There were like
sorry,
anticipations that it's already implemented by now. Again,
what development?
CBDCs, central bank digital currencies.
Ah,
So
so when the government gets to track all of our
yes, so essentially the perversion of the original idea of decentralized currency. It's more centralized, it's more traceable, it's more easily you can have your faucets closed more easily by someone else. I mean, we've seen the first overreaches in Canada, where the trucker protests that got their accounts barred, then moved over to Bitcoin, and then the Canadian government reached out to the owners of the platforms that they used, and they had to explain back to the Canadian government, hey, you clearly don't know how crypto functions. We can't bar them in any way. And we wouldn't, but we also can't. So yeah, that
Same
seems to be a big one.
control the on-off ramps, and as
Yes.
people discovered, it's yeah. I mean, let's not go. I mean, we can go for 2 minutes to down the crypto rabbit hole. So, what happened with crypto? First of all, the transaction costs are much higher than Visa, Mastercard.
Yep.
So, this whole promise of it's completely not there. I don't know if any of the alternative networks have costs comparable to Visa, Mastercard. And also, you should look at Visa, Mastercard internal costs,
Hmm.
which their internal cost is probably a fraction of a cent per transaction.
Yes.
So costs are high. You can't use it anywhere. You have to get crypto to buy eggs, right? Uh, and that's on the current side. But for me, and this is what I hope we will explore more and more in Coherence, is what I'm excited about is the organization side
Yes.
of crypto. But because, you know, most of us, we're really good at understanding our problems. And if we're somewhat open-minded, we understand the problems of our friends, right? We're very bad at understanding in a meaningful and in a deeply compassionate and effective way the
Hmm.
problems of people that are far, far removed from us in the wealth hierarchy or geographically. So crypto keeps on trying to solve problems of middle class, geeky men.
Hmm.
Right? I won't even say white because it's actually quite global, but it's mostly white. But who cares? It's like when geeky computer guys are, doesn't matter your skin color, they're all the same personality. Uh, I remember I was a few years ago, I was in Amsterdam. I was sitting at a table with my friend who's quite successful in this space and a bunch of his friends. And they were like, one of the guys was talking, yeah, I really need this dashboard to track my investment across different chains and to be able to do derivatives across chains. And I was sitting there going, I was like,
It's a deep
okay,
need.
see how this is an important problem in your life, but this
Hmm.
is so not an important problem for humanity to solve. This is like so, but crypto just keeps on solving those problems.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and actually, I think, and this is one of my kind of hopes, and not this year, but in the coming years, I really want to connect with people that are in the precariat, the bottom 1 or 2 billion, because they actually have smartphones
Hmm.
and the state is not really working for them. Which means to me, they're the perfect audience. If we can develop solutions, they're open to solutions. Because your micro entrepreneur in the ghetto, slum, wherever, pick doing whatever, he's never starting a company. He's never going to create a legal shell of a company because it's just it's not right. Banks don't work a lot with them, though that's being solved more and more.
Hmm. Yes.
So if we can create solutions which support their entrepreneurship and their lives, they'll use them. I was talking, I really hope at the start of next year to go to Uganda. There's a cool guy in a refugee camp there. He's a refugee doing refugee entrepreneurship programs. And I asked him, what percentage of people have smartphones in the camp? He said 2 out of 5 adults, which means at least one smartphone per household. I said electricity. He said, well, depends the part. In general, okay, some parts of the camp are good all the time, some are off and on, but they have electricity. I said, okay, internet. He said, well, if you can afford a SIM, you have internet. So the capacity, the hardware capacity is there, right? What
Hmm.
software solutions can we create that would enable them to collaborate more effectively, more effectively, learn this and that? That's where I think a huge one area of huge potential is for all of these blockchain organizations, because the current systems completely don't work with them. Trying to go head to head with Visa in the developed world, it's a high order.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've recently seen a Senate hearing where they were asked about their profits. And as you said, like their internal costs are probably exceedingly low. And they have such a high profit margin and therefore are able to um, lobby hard and really corner the markets. And that's what this hearing was about. And it was, yeah, it was a level of delusional to not notice how unethical your methods of competition are. So yeah, they are dominating still, but also this one seems to be on the move that we're noticing where people use their monopoly kind of position to play dirty. Um, the one thing that I would like the section I think what might be a good closing. You talked about state violence as well, and we shall move towards the things we want to have instead. And it's a pattern or it's a mechanism that might also apply to everything else we talked since state violence. Let's say the more dysfunctional, more exploitative patterns that they in a way resign themselves. And I wanted to just really quickly read a quote that was written in an article by a friend, and that I don't know, I'm coming back to it every few months or so because it gorgeously puts how this might go. And this specifically is about state violence, but it might apply to all of these topics that we might want to transcend. The quote goes, "The more powerless the old paradigm gets, however, the more violence it inflicts, and the more violence it inflicts, the more authority it loses. This loss of authority in the eyes of the governed destroys the political power of the predation state, which in turn transforms the governed into the ungovernable. Thus, any predation state, through its own incompetence and expediency, double binds itself into a hopeless choice to either one, surrender to its political death, or two, to continue inflicting violence, which accelerates its political death." Um, yes.
Yes, and you need to add the dimension of time to it. Because
Mhm.
states don't live in human length lifetimes, they live in the lifetimes of hundreds of years. Right? So look at world's favorite extreme dysfunctional state, North Korea. They've been oppressing and they've been doing this for 70 years. And we have examples from history where this slow spiral can continue for hundreds of years. And that's many lifetimes lived under misery. Soviet Union, again, 70, 80 years of, no, less before it collapsed. And then but if you look at the bigger arc of uh, Russian history, right?
Mhm.
They just keep on going back to dictators because they don't understand how to make the other way work,
Yeah.
right? After the Soviet, the Bolshevik Revolution, there was, first they got the Tsar went away, they were democratic for a little while, didn't work. The Bolsheviks, they were nice for a while and then went to dictatorship. Then they got rid of the Soviet Union. It was kind of nice and open, but chaotic. And now they're back to a dictator.
Mhm.
They could spend another 300-400 years doing this back and forth.
Do you think it's a time for this? Like, do you 300-400 years would imply that not enough in within the collective hive mind changes so that it can go on, so that the conditions are there for the old patterns to persist that long. I would also like I would always give it whatever we see as a change, upcoming change, give it a decade, maybe multiple, but a few hundred years for something that already appears to be so clearly outdated in a way. Do you think so? Multiple centuries?
Easily.
Huh.
When was the French Revolution?
17 something?
And when did French democracy start?
I don't know, actually.
I don't know. I don't know either, but it was a couple hundred years after that.
Hmm.
Then you had the terror, and then you had Napoleon back to dictatorship, right? And then
Hmm.
I don't know my French history well enough. Now they're clearly a functioning, still the hierarchical, but a well-functioning democracy, right?
Hmm.
It wasn't, it took a while. I once watched this really great video of, this was, I think, like 10 years ago or something that it was made. So I think it was with the guy that's the prince of Saudi Arabia now. It's really interesting. They followed him, and it's like a good BBC that the documentary life. The guy is, I mean, he is a high level intellectual, right? Like your English, my English, nothing. BBC, Oxford level. Clearly educated at the world's best schools. And the quote from him, which stuck in my life, was, he said, "You Europeans, you want us to become a democracy. And we also want to become a democracy. But you forget that it took you 400 years of the world's bloodiest warfare to get there. We would also like to get there, but without all of the bloodshed."
Yeah, that's about right.
Right?
Yeah,
And
the one thing that
forget that, like the cycles, look at the cycles in Europe, right? Like we had the revolutions, and then empire, and then we had World War One. We're like, fuck, that's really not nice. Let's not do that again. And then we had World War Two. We did it again, and then we're like, oh, this is really, really, really not nice. And then European Union came, and it's kind of holding now. But actually, this is an interesting challenge that the European Union has, in my opinion, is they haven't come up with a new story. And this story of World War Two, never World War One, World War Two, never again that, is faded because the generation that remembers that
Mhm.
is died off. So it goes in cycles. And I mean, look, even in Europe, right? The shift to the hard right, which is a shift towards dictatorial governance methodologies, is still very much there. It's, changing individual habits is very hard. Changing the habits of a whole population as to
Mhm.
how we govern and organize, it takes centuries.
Mhm. I agree. The caveat for me is the overall rate of change has accelerated immensely, and the rate at which information and new ideas can spread and resonant ideas whose time has come, the rate at which they can spread has also accelerated massively. And if it's any indication, and it's not a majority, but if a few teenagers that I've met, for example, while traveling, like 17, 18 years old, some of them were so strikingly bright, despite the, let's say, pathological pressures of social media and noise, online noise. If that's any indication, maybe maybe we can expect a change in the timelines we're working with. Like there's a clear acceleration. If you're looking at like evolution, just evolution up until humans, then early stage humans up until industrialization, then industrialization until digitalization, and now digitalization towards artificial intelligence. This is just such a exponential curve, and I wonder there in my mind there has to be some interaction with rate of change in societal patterns.
Yes, at the same time, Look, Russia and China are also digital nations. North Korea less so, but Russia and China are still very much digital nations, and it goes back to this window and the fork, right? That digital technology can also be used to create the ultimate
Yeah.
surveillance state. AI can be used to shape people's thinking even more powerfully than the education system and control of the media,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, so uh, the reason that I think that the big systems will fail, right? Why did the Soviet Union fail? Do you know why?
From my understanding, like you spoke to the far right shift, and that it kind of implies a shift towards authoritarian system, dictatorship. From what I can see, the far right is more of an overt
Was
dictatorship style.
why did the Soviet Union fail?
Yes, yes, yes. I wanted to get there. And in my mind, the promise of socialism, if it's not, I mean, it's I think it's very hard to put this idea on a population, and therefore it's it most often would end up a more covert authoritarian style. But it's still an authoritarian style. It's still class mindset. It's still exploitation. It's just under the guise of messages of empathy, solidarity, this kind of stuff. So one part of it breaking, I would say, is that the image of the human being, that the core of it wasn't in any way what we would say is part of the turquoise vision. It was the same mindset cloaked in in a different in a certain style of governance that wasn't what it claimed to be. It wasn't actually empathetic. It wasn't actually social.
That is all true. It was actually completely not social.
Yeah.
Uh, Having grown up in socialism, this is the funny thing, right? People are like, oh, socialism versus capitalism or social versus democracy. And it's the same shit. Streets, roads, schools, it's all exactly the same as in the West, right? On a
Hmm.
day-to-day basis, your life in Poland, I'll speak to Poland, right? Because Poland wasn't a hard dictatorship. People weren't disappearing in the middle of the night when I was living there. It was not social. People didn't talk to their neighbors, da da da. But the reason the Soviet Union died is that the US, they got into a arms race, which was a spending race, an economic race versus the Americans, and the
Hmm.
Americans outspent them. So they spent themselves into a hole and crashed their economy. I
Hmm.
arguably the economic system was not functioning very well because if it belongs to the it went from a yeah, if it belongs to the country, it belongs to nobody, so might as well steal from it. And all of that. But yeah, the Americans spent them into the ground and the economy collapsed. They just like yeah. So the reason that I think it's interesting and the reason that I believe that in the long run, open systems will outcompete closed systems is that to me, I haven't looked at the research, but to me, it's clear that the open systems are more creative, innovative, productive,
Hmm.
and effective
Hmm.
in the long run. In the short run, dictatorship is the most effective form of governance, right? We've known this for thousands of years. A good, benevolent king or emperor is the best form of governance. But it never lasts, and sooner or later you get Nero or another crazy guy, and So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but the fork is there because we could go to the surveillance route, hard surveillance route, and it won't last forever, but it could last a couple hundred years.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's really important to build up these alternative systems. And even if we lose this time, if we send the stories, right, into the future, they will affect the trajectory of humanity. Look at Greece, look at Athens, shitty little slave owning city in ancient world, right? Was not big, most people were not free, and yet still it created the whole trope of democracy, which has affected our thinking for 2000 whatever years, right? So we actually don't even have to create, if we start looking at the bigger time and looking at the bigger things, right? What is worth doing becomes very different than if you're just looking at the scope of your own life.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So so returning to the so we've been talking about the fork in the road. Um, Surveillance technocracy versus turquoise. Turquoise is not without technology. Mm, Optimally. Like it seems to be like something that just yearns to be integrated, not something to be discarded because it's part of established monolithic power structures. Um, Another note that I took, like in preparation to this call with you, was the merger essentially of an unstoppable tech trend. Like in under today's rules, the trend of technology seems to be quite unstoppable. You can have dreams of a different world. You can have dreams of just return to an organic lifestyle, but you will have to live alongside escalating technological biases and increasingly governance merged with technology. So, so another point was the merger of an unstoppable tech trend and an essential trend of regeneration and societal coherence, let's say. Um, what are your initial thoughts on this almost apparently necessary merger, if these are not meant to coexist in a split and isolated way?
So I think it's completely necessary. I don't believe, right? In turquoise, we're talking about really thinking and sensing systemically. And as a biological being, and we've done pretty good, right, in scaling our society. However, we've done it in a top down and very, all of our societies are shaped by the technologies and the communication technologies that we have, right? We started with speech, and that enabled us to get much bigger and bigger groups and so on and so forth. In turquoise, right? How am I supposed to sense and be sensitive to a global system,
Hmm.
right? Composed of so many things. So the level of, I believe, to me, it's clear that the level of wide view that's needed to be even, in the context of your neighborhood, right? Because the impact of everything is so much bigger. Without technology, I believe it's impossible. Similarly, I've been, turquoise is, to me, it's an aspirational thing. We're trying to figure out what it is. I've been around the teal organizations world for 10, 12 years, more kind of a learner and trying to apply it. I wouldn't say I'm so super expert, but most of the super experts are my friends, and I've been in regular conversation and I have observed them building organizations and such. And the movement has really struggled to take off in
Hmm.
a bigger way. I think partially because the purpose wasn't strong enough. Let's make nicer organizations to make nicer organizations is not powerful enough. I believe with connecting it to regeneration of, we need to make a better world so we don't, do all of those things that we said. And for this, we need better organizations. And this is the methodology to make better organizations. So purpose is there, but I think, yeah, we need the tools supporting us, right? I think there's an interesting idea which is probably relevant now that we had on our call 2 days ago when we're talking about singularity. And what I mentioned is that people think singularity means that the individual human merges with machine and I'm a cyborg and all of this. But I think actually what's much more likely, and we have merged, right? My phone is here, so we have merged to a certain degree, but I don't think we need to merge much more. What is happening is singularity at the societal level, where a
Yeah.
society merges technologically with AI. And if you want to have meaningful sensing at societal scale or global societal scale, you can't do that other than technologically.
What do you mean by, did you say meaningful sensing?
Sensing.
What do you mean by sensing in this context?
What are people thinking? What are their needs? Are
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
happy? Is a particular thing affecting them a little or a lot, right?
Hmm.
If you think about it, our governance and organization tools are really very, very primitive, right? The main government economic tool is the interest rate,
Yeah.
which is about as subtle as a crowbar. Like, oh, Merlin, can we meet tomorrow? And my only tool to get you to communicate with you about it, not even to like, my only tool to communicate is a crowbar, right? So where should I hit you with the crowbar so that you understand that we should meet tomorrow, right? I mean, it's at that level of communication, but those are the only mechanisms that existed 100, 200 years ago,
Hmm.
right? Uh, So without technology, we cannot have systemic, big systems, systemic sensing, and we cannot operate in a more, our governance methodologies are very crude because they were developed when that was the only thing that existed. It's kind of one way of thinking about it is the love-centric society versus the power-centric society.
Hmm. Hmm.
And power is being very effective. And if you look at, and also the reason, I don't know how much you've read, but if you look at the accounts of early humans, which mean pre-agriculture, true hunter-gatherers, not the ones that have been squeezed from 16 sides by agriculturists, they were a powerless group. They didn't have power over force, right? People talk to each other because actually, if you think about it, it makes logical sense because as a hunter-gatherer, you're independent. And if you start to become too annoying and too overbearing, I'll just pick up and go somewhere else. And the image that we have that hunter-gatherers were this group alone in the wilderness is completely wrong because actually I know there's a group over there where my uncle and my aunt is, there's another group over there where my grandmother is, there's another group over there where my whatever is. I have options and I can just pick my shit up because that's all I have. I can pick my shit up and go somewhere else if you start to become an overbearing asshole, right? So I can't hear you, Sydney. 1 2 1 2. Nope. You
All right.
can.
Can you hear me
Now,
now?
yeah.
I switched over to my other microphone. For some reason, it malfunctioned. Whatever. So
So
there's,
let me finish the thought. So we
yeah.
start, and this is why instinctively, when people try and oppress us and like do this power over, like our guts rebel because this is not how what we evolved to be. But then we went to agriculture and all of this, and we didn't have the communication and sensing technologies to operate at scale
Mhm.
without power over. So we used the one technology that we had is power and violence to organize. because organizing through love requires deep connection and sensing, right? Like we don't need physical violence power over with my wife to work together, to collaborate because we love each other. We have a very deep connection. But in order to build that deep connection, right, our neuro context is designed up to 150 people. How do I build a deep connection with 8 billion people and an Earth scale ecosystem so I can feel love for it and act out of love to this bigger system, right? Either I get completely enlightened and, become a Buddha, but we tried it for a few thousand years. It's hard to get people to that level.
Hmm.
And it requires spending 20, 30, for most people, 20, 30 years. And then also, once you get to that level, you just kind of sit around and tell people how great everything is. So, yeah. But that's the question, right? How do we create the technology that enables us to feel love for the bigger system?
Yes. And it's a steep ask because we grew up in a tribal relationship. The everything that mattered to us was immediate and close by. And now we're called to apply the same kind of concern to a whole planet, optimally. And there's an obvious tricky ask there. But I wanted to get back for a second to essentially your claim that you were somehow free to go as a hunter-gatherer. And I think so. I don't think there's a general answer or an answer that applies to like all tribes, all situations on planet Earth before industrialization or agriculture. But as a heuristic, as a tendency, I would have actually argued the opposite, interestingly. So that you were more dependent on being a part of your tribe, of not being exiled, of maintaining social bonds. You were less free in a way. You weren't free to go. You were in high danger. If you've been exiled, you were in high danger of just not making it.
So
And
this is, I mean, like you said, many different environments and so on and so forth. The books that I've read is that people were fundamentally independent because you could
Mhm.
just go to the forest. You knew how to survive in the forest. You wouldn't starve, right? The way you and I, you throw me or you in the jungle or any forest for longer than our fat series and like we're not going to do well, but they knew how to feed themselves and so on and so forth. And they knew many other groups around. They had different levels of relationship
Mhm.
that they could join or move to. So that's why I think, again, I'm not an expert, but I read a few books on hunter gatherers, and that's why I really think it's important. There's not much, right? 100 years ago, there is still a few uncontacted bands, but they've just been, most of the bands that we've studied have been under uh, high pressure from agriculture, so from modern society, so they stopped functioning the way they used to. But I think at a basic level, it's important when we talk about basic human nature, people tend to go back to early agrarian societies,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
it's not. That's
Right.
not basic human nature. We need to look at hunter gatherers and try and find what we can. I'll share with you. There's an amazing the more yeah, I've read two or three amazing books. One is by Lars van der Post. You know the guy. He
No.
wrote Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Anyways, he went and he, I think in the 20s or 30s, he found some uncontacted groups and went
Ah,
with
yeah.
them. Uh, but there is things like, for example, I can't remember. I think it must be maybe it's um, the Kung, the Sun people. But anyways, for one of the groups is when a hunter comes in with a really big kill, you know what happens? The whole village gets around, looks at it with a disgusted look, goes, "Really? Is this the best you could do? It looks like it died in your arms."
Really?
You want us to eat this because they know, everybody knows, and it's done in humor and jokingly, but they know that this is the moment where, your ego goes up, right? Look at me, I got this big animal.
I
So the
see.
culturally built-in mechanism is to put you down.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. This is where the social controls around us really change a lot. And now we have yeah, often the opposite, I feel. I mean, oh no, social media can also tear you down, but it can also really build you up for nothing. Um,
Yeah, so going back to, I think the technology, it's very interesting to see how the technologies, communication technologies in particular, changed our governance systems. And there's
mhm,
things that are well documented, like the Protestant Revolution happened because of the printing press. It's a direct consequence, and growing
mhm,
literacy and other things. And now I think with the technology, right, going back to so there is a fork, right? Either we go, blockchain, right? Every time you fart, every time you buy anything, right, the government will know. So at a much higher level of control that the Soviets or whoever could ever imagine. Already there is the now my new favorite story, the toilets in China that have facial recognition for toilet paper, so you don't take too much toilet paper, right? So every time you wipe your ass, the Chinese Communist Party knows about this. Uh, and so on and so forth. Or we can really use it to develop ability to collaborate
mhm,
at scale, right? There's this idea of collective intelligence. If we want to be able to collaborate bottom up, then we need to be able to sense and do this and the only way, the only tools which will enable us to do this at scale is digital. We need the culture, of course. So whoever is listening, it's not like the technology will save our ass. But what I study, for example, monetary ecology world. You've also looked at the blockchain world, the teal organizations, da da da. And the reason that one of the reasons, which I think they haven't gone much more mainstream, is they didn't have a good tool support to dissipate it. And it's both to actually implement this turquoise way of collaborating, as well as to help people learn this new way.
mhm.
Because we forget we've really spent our whole lives being indoctrinated into a power over hierarchical way of working and being together. What is the school system? The school system teaches you one thing: sit down, shut up, do what you're told. There's one person at the front of the room, they're in charge, you do what they're told, what you're told. And it's probably the most powerful indoctrination system we've ever devised, next to religion.
Mhm.
And so this idea of collaboration means power over one person tells others what to do is deeply baked into ourselves. And to deprogram ourselves from this really intense
Mhm.
programming is not easy. And I think we need all the best tools to support us in that. And I've been dreaming, for example, for a AI teal team coach for 10, 12 years, right?
Interesting. Yes. Yeah, I mean these there are clearly better and worse uses of AI. One thing, like as you're saying, there is a segment of technology that can definitely support the right kind of trend, obviously. Um, Apart from like, for example, keeping AI to keep like the shared context of a team awake or like this coaching option. Although there's a sense within me that a coach a coach still right now at the current stage of AI at least is still better human for the intuitive sensing capacity. But that aside, uh,
Yes. Yes, but this is important. You can't drop that and not let me add the yes, but it's much less scalable.
Right. Yes.
An AI coach I can give for, I don't know, cost of a few dollars or 10, 50 euros a month to any team on earth. A human being, of course. But the question is not, is it better? The question is it good enough that given the price difference, it's valuable?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Uh, 1 second. Where did I want to go? Oh yeah, right. The like obvious, I would say, edge that AI has on us is the information processing capacity. The breadth and wealth of information can be processed in a certain time frame. Um, and like my own scanning of what's there, what's possible, and what would allow for this merger of unstoppable tech trend and essential information trend. Where my mind went first, and it might have to do with my priming on circular economy, was essentially making sense of all the different variables in the system. The first glimpse was um, it's notoriously hard for a human mind to process all the material cycles that would need to be closed. Endless amounts of materials going in and out, and to close the loop on each. I felt this is a really good application for AI or just technology. Um, Specifically, then, when it relates not to information processing and closing material loops and this kind of stuff, but as soon as the bridge is made toward human interaction, there's just a part of me that wonders how straightforward, how much should we say, hey, yeah, just apply technology, apply AI to facilitate human connection and interaction. What is the level of AI development that has to have taken place in order for this to not be spoiled? Because there is this essentially danger or this specific signature of human interaction where you have voice inflections, bodily signals, like body language, this kind of stuff, and like this famous number of, I don't know what it was, somewhere between 70 and 80%, that is specifically not verbal. That kind of in the initial stages just falls away with AI. And I have no answers here. It's a question to me. How careful or how with how much abandonment we should just say, hey, yeah, let's throw AI at human interaction, at human collaboration, and and not think twice. I wonder how careful we're called to be, or how liberate, or how free we are to just say, hey, let's go. What do you think?
So, first of all, I think it's really important to recognize that AI has been shaping our relationship since the rise of social media, right?
Mhm.
Anytime you open YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, TikTok, whatever, right? That's an AI shaping your what you see. So, what and incredibly powerfully and optimized to create many corporations, many hundreds of billions in profit, right? So the first thing is we need to more consciously talk about what are we optimizing for, right?
Mhm.
So probably we don't need any new technology or algorithms. What Facebook had 10 years ago was more than good enough, but we need to change what we're optimizing for. A, and then B, I think what we need to have is open transparency or much more transparency of what the algorithms are doing, right? And then on top of that, my ideal is experimentation, right? That we have different groups experimenting with different AIs, right? Like I would love to see a Christian collaboration AI which is designed around Christ consciousness and getting people to be more Christ-like in their daily life. Great. We know clearly what the 2,000 people have been talking about it, but then how do you implement it and which version of Christ-like consciousness do you have? And then let's see where that goes. And then somebody else experiments with a full-on anarchist collaboration thing, right? So I think we need to experiment. It's not technology, yes, no, algorithms, yes, no. It's with how much intentionality are we applying them, right?
Yes.
Because right now we just took the old economic system, extracting money from the thing and slapped algorithms onto it.
Yeah.
And algorithms optimize really, really well, right? And that back to the people killing themselves, right? I think measurement of outcomes is also really important, right? So I think what we need is much more intentionality and consciousness, right? This is the goal, this is my hypothesis, this is the algorithms that I'm implementing, and this is how I'm measuring the impact of the algorithms.
Mhm.
And if we have that loop up out in the open with many people trying different things, then we can have right? The problem is not technology. The problem is that we've thrown technology. I mean, we're experimenting with human society at global scale, right? It's kind of funny if you think about it. The amount of bullshit you have to go through in academia in order to run any test on humans. I don't mean like cutting people, I mean just like psychological tests, right? It's all so controlled. And yet Facebook rolls out experiments on multiple billions of people every day. Every
Yeah.
day they're playing with the algorithm, right? Zero control, zero awareness. So and with most other technologies, right? Business rolls out ecological ecosystem scale experiments and all of human scale experiments every day with zero control, right? Like, oh, microplastics. Maybe we shouldn't put little fucking microplastics into the washing powder. We only notice this when we fucked half of the world's ecosystem, right?
Oh, and
Uh,
our own endocrine systems. Uh,
and yeah, all of that, right? So I think we need more awareness that what we're doing, and I'm not going to talk about the physical spheres because it's not my world. I talk about the digital world, right? And this is the what we're trying to do with Coherence is to get these conversations to people that are designing and building the technologies of exactly what goals, right? What vision and what goals are you building towards? What algorithms are you building to create those goals? How are you measuring impact?
yes. I have to chime in for a second. I gotta take a little break, real urgent. I'll tell Wasai to maybe edit out or ask him.
Click
Um,
pause. Click pause.
or you can just write. You can just write. I'll do that. All right. For the last point on my list, the third topic is and we touched on it already, but the AIification of collaboration in society with the subpoints of like the idea of a superorganism, which to me brings up the question of eusociality. Like in hives, there's this clear distinction of function. There are queens, there are workers, there are like there's something that you see already to some degree in human society, but that I don't think is part of the vision of many people. And in our little pre-talk, you pointed out that the role of the individual is very differently perceived in other societies. Uh, and yeah, I just wanted to ask for your initial thoughts on specifically the eusociality, your vision of how the interaction between human society, our own evolution, and the evolution of technology might look like, and which philosophy might be part of this or might be accompanying this of the human being, of the collective, of the individual.
So, uh, and by the way, at least in ants, yes, there is workers and there is soldiers and stuff. But when work needs to be done, everybody rolls up their sleeves and does what needs to be done, right? It's not like there's a battle and all of the workers are standing around waiting for the soldiers to. No, no, like, everybody pitches in when they need it. And that's, I mean, I am a anarchist at heart, and what to me anarchism means, and by the way, anarchists got a really bad reputation because they're a threat to anybody top-down power, left, whether fascist or communist, left or right, any kind of centralized top-down power, anarchists are a threat to. That's why there's a beautiful anarchist revolution in Spain. They ran Barcelona, I think, for almost a year. All of the reports say it was amazing. But then they got crushed by the left and the right both.
Hmm.
So, and that to me connects back to the hunter-gatherers, right? Or our fundamental thing is we're social beings and we want to pitch in and be useful.
Mhm.
We want to contribute, and this is where it's wired into our sense of being, wanting to be, wanting our life to feel meaningful is our life, we feels like we're contributing to the greater whole, right? Because we're social beings in our DNA. However, and this worked really well when we knew everybody and we had relationships and we could understand and sense their needs and emotional states because we spend most of our lives together. How do I sense into the emotional states of 8 billion people and understand what I can do in my own limited capacity that will nevertheless be of value to the 8 billion people? So I see, right, with the technology and the sensing and allowing people to better discover how they can apply their, first of all, to understand their skills and energies, and then to discover how to apply their skills and energies to create value of society in such a way that they're remunerated for it and that they're contributing, right? So if you think about it in a traditional society, whether hunter-gatherer or agrarian, it's pretty easy, right? I can see, my body, I was born with a strong body, da da da. Okay, so I'm good for hunting and this kind of a thing. Or I am good at talking to people. So, I can see in front of me the roles that are available because they're limited and they're part of the thing. I can sense my body and I get feedback from other people in the community who have, seen other young people to go through this. In the modern world, where I have 1,000,001 careers reasonably available to me, and all of this, how the hell do I figure this out? I mean,
Mhm.
this is again, if we don't have AI or tools helping me, uh, right? Did that answer your question? And then I think what we will have, right? Because we want to do what we're good at whilst contributing. And finding that is so hard in modern society, right?
Mhm.
Finding my thing and then finding how do I make a livelihood from my thing, right? But if we have this, singularity, digital AI society, it can help me and guide me through over years to find the career, job, work, or whatever, which I will love doing because it fits my proclivities. And then I can find where I can apply myself, right?
Yes.
Then, I will work with joy to contribute because that's what we all want to do.
Yes. So what I hear is the to be in service of the collective is not at all uh, a resignation of the individual in this scenario. Um,
It's the ultimate expression of the individual.
yes. So I think that that's the like bright vision that would be paired with this. It's a very holistic view. It's just your it's from what I understand the spirit of the ikigai idea from Japan, that you're just finding your place in the whole that fulfills you, that drives you, that just fills your life with purpose, and that represents a contribution. The one concern specifically with like old thinking, old power structures, old incentives, old images of the human being in place still. Um, when we talked about this, like in short before this talk, and regarding the notion of eusociality, the one concern that came in for me was now I forgot his name. Ideological subversion. Yuri Bezmenov. He had an interview sometime in the 1980s, maybe 90s. I'm not sure. And he talked about he's a KGB defector, and he talked about the psychological strategies essentially of the KGB. And he talked at length about ideological subversion and to which degree you can essentially motivate people to seize the pursuit of their own personal interest, and not in a healthy way, but for the purpose of their submission to the greater good. That, of course, is defined by a state that has its own interest. And he was defining four stages of it. And I have the sense that we to some degree see this in the world we're living in the past 20 years. Like, for example, the one stage, I think the first stage actually was um, the a stage of demoralization. Um, and of preparing the minds of people over a full generation. Like the time frame he said was 15 to 20 years to educate a full generation differently than the one before, and essentially make them ready for some kind of systemic shift that is already preconceived at this point. Um, as a question to you, how would you cleanly differentiate the one from the other? The Yeah, I think you get the question. I don't have to like f further it. Um,
I mean, this is the eternal question of what's the difference between propaganda and marketing or
mhm.
between manipulation and support, right? I think the intent turns the intent is key, right? You know, if you want manipulation of habits, that's what a bloody exercise app is, right? It's there pinging you, gamifying your exercise, all of these things, right? It's clearly designed to modify my behavior as powerfully as it possibly can. But clearly, it's not evil because I signed up to it and I would really like it to get me to exercise or to live a healthier life.
Mhm.
It's still manipulation, right? It's trying to do its best to manipulate me. uh, and so on down the line, right? So I think intent is fundamental, is one thing, and then transparency of intent,
Yeah.
right? So that's why, for example,
How would you ensure that? That
sorry.
the How would you ensure that the intent is transparent and not like it's a too common game of today's world to claim a certain intent that sounds good and do something else, pursue something else. So it's in some way it's I mean I personally hyper fixated on this stuff before because I just didn't want to get fooled. Would say I went too far. I had this scanning too prominently. I trusted too little. Um, but it's
So,
it's still a question in my mind. How do you make sure that the intent is transparent and not just
so I think
portrayed or
one
presented?
one thing that actually is a bit of a rabbit hole, especially Anglo-Saxon, but other societies, this idea of neutrality. Oh, you know, our press should be neutral. Bullshit. There's no such thing as not having an opinion,
Mhm.
right? Be clear about your ideology. For a while, I was reading online the Communist Workers Press. because they had good news and they were absolutely clear. And it was kind of funny because they would write like a generic story, and then like you felt that at the last paragraph they had to add, and that's the
Yeah.
world communist movement says da 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 da. So just be clear, first of all, being clear about the intention. So for me, for example, I also have a really strong uh, instinct, and I get triggered by manipulation. But if I'm in a place, like for example, I can go to any house of worship and listen to the priest's sermon because it's clear. It says on the box, I'm
Mhm.
in a Christian church, I'm going to get this line of thinking, and this is what they're thinking. It's obvious. It's clear, right? It says on the box, there's a picture on the front before you walk in. This is what they believe in. This is what they're going to try and sell you. So then you know. But if somebody says like, "Oh yeah, I'm here for your best good," da da da, and then is trying to feed you some kind of an ideology,
Mhm.
and then I think going back to what we said in the previous segment, right? Like, this is my ideology. This is the belief that I'm trying to put into the world. This is my hypothesis of how I'm doing it. This is how I'm measuring the impact of what I'm actually doing. So yeah, I mean, becoming more transparent about, because the first one is just the ideology. This is my ideology. And then the second one is you were saying, like, yeah, but people say this is the ideology, but they do a different thing, right? So you also have to talk about, right, like, this is how I think you should behave, or this is how I think the economy should be, and then measure the actual impact versus your ideology. So
Mhm.
and that's where I think with these new technologies, blockchain, wise AI, conscious collaboration tools, we can become much more scientific and quantifiable about what is actually happening.
Mhm. Mhm. All right. I'm noticing I'm not having much to add. I just agree with this notion. I see this potential too. There's just at times whenever our focus goes toward what's possible, there's this piece of metacognition sparked within me that says, hey, and to which degree, um, like, how can we ensure that our path toward this is not spoiled by something that just sounds like it and pursues something else? Um,
So I do you know the idea of anti-fragile? Have you heard of
yes,
anti-fragile?
yes,
So this is the question of how can we design a path that's anti-fragile?
yeah,
So when we're challenged, when we go off the route, when we da da da, we use this as a learning loop, right? The goal is not to fail or fuck up. The goal is to have systems where every time you fuck up, you eventually notice it and you learn from it and you create capacity to not do that again.
yes.
And that's I think much healthier at one level. And yeah, I mean, maybe to conclude, to talk just for 2 3 minutes about coherence, how does it fit into this, right? So if we agree that we have this hypothesis experiment measurement loop that we need for systems, so our hypothesis with coherence is that if we create this opportunity for people to have collaborative conversations, this will improve relationships, create better relationships, which will create more for action. So that's our hypothesis. Our experiment is coherence, bringing leaders into collaborative conversations, publishing them, passing it through AI. And then I guess we have to think about how we're going to measure our impact, but
Mhm.
we will do that for the bigger coherence in September. So I think one thing, that we didn't include at all in our conversation, what I would conclude with, what's really important is a sense of play. Don't take this fucking shit all so seriously and da 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 da. Because play is actually experimentation, play is joy in the process, play is having fun with it. Play is not taking yourself seriously.
Yes.
So if we remember to hang on to this sense of play, I think that will be a key part in getting us through this, and yeah. creating a better society.
Yes, I agree. It's yeah, it really aligns with like one argument, one key notion that essentially brought me out of this more distrusting state that I alluded to. Um, that the true rebellion, if there is an incentive to make people miserable to some degree, to seek for compensation, to seek for like make themselves dependent on whatever is offered, then the true revolution, the true rebellion, would lie in a more light state, in a more playful state, in a state unaffected by whatever is there to bog you down in order to offer you solutions to it. So yeah, I agree. Let's be playful about it. Uh, any other closing remarks? Otherwise, we might wrap up.
Let's be more playful. How can we be more powerful than that?
Yes,
Let's dance and sing and celebrate and have fun with this. I
yes,
think the fundamental thing is okay. I'll have one closing remark. The quote from David Graeber, the book that I'm reading it, is that all of these systems that we see around were created by men, as in humanity,
yes,
and whatever we created, we can create in a different way. As long as we believe that, anything is possible.